Under the scorching sun of a quiet coastal town, the tang of salt and diesel hung in the air as fishing boats swayed gently against worn docks. A black former Navy SEAL, now a fisherman, wiped grease from his hands, his sharp gaze scanning the horizon. Nearby, his daughter balanced effortlessly on the edge of a boat, securing ropes with precision gained from years of practice. Then the low, menacing growl of motorcycle engines shattered the stillness. 5 bikers rumbled into the lot, their chrome glinting under the sun, leather vests emblazoned with serpent insignias. Their leader was the first to dismount, exuding arrogance as he stepped forward. Tension crackled in the air like an approaching storm, but the fisherman didn't waver. He stood his ground, his expression calm, concealing the lethal expertise of a man forged in war. The biker sneered, stepping closer, mistaking silence for weakness. He didn't realize he had just challenged the wrong man. As dawn spilled golden hues across Tidewater Haven, the coastal town awakened, stretching along the Atlantic's edge. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, their wooden hulls rocking in rhythm with the tide. The scent of salt mixed with the fresh aroma of pine drifting from the mainland. Docks groaned under the weight of fishermen hauling in their early morning catch, while seagulls cried overhead, circling in search of discarded scraps. At first glance, the town exuded an air of simplicity. Neighbors exchanging greetings, tourists meandering through narrow streets in search of fresh seafood and quaint souvenirs. But beneath its postcard-perfect charm, shadows lurked. Whispers of a gang tightening its grip on local businesses spread in hushed conversations. Protection money was demanded, fear preyed upon, and most residents chose to keep their heads down, hoping to avoid the inevitable storm. Marcus Mack, Carter had always preferred to stay in his lane. Standing at the entrance of his workshop, his broad frame cast a commanding silhouette against the rising sun. At 42, he carried the quiet authority of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he wiped oil-stained hands on a rag, eyes scanning the harbor with a soldier's instinct. Mack owned Carter's Marine Repair, a modest shop wedged between the docks. It wasn't grand, but it was his, a business built with calloused hands and the patience of a man who had fought for his own peace. To the townspeople, Mack was a dependable figure, the one who kept their boats running through every storm. What they didn't know, what Mack rarely shared, was the past he carried. Years ago, he had served as a Navy SEAL, living a life dictated by discipline, danger, and precision. He had seen war, lost friends, and survived encounters that left scars both seen and unseen. One mission had gone wrong, leaving him wounded in more ways than one. That was when he chose to trade combat boots for work boots, carving out a quieter existence in Tidewater Haven. But the instincts he had honed over years, awareness, strategy, the ability to act when needed, had never faded. They lingered beneath his calm exterior, waiting. Inside the workshop, Mack's daughter, Imani, moved with the same quiet intensity as her father. At 22, she was sharp-eyed and relentless, her curly hair tucked beneath a faded baseball cap. She wore grease-smudged jeans and work boots, exuding confidence in every movement. "Dad," she called, her voice cutting through the rhythmic hum of tools. "We need to upgrade this inventory system. This paper log nonsense is ancient." Mack didn't look up as he grunted. "Paper doesn't crash." "Neither does an online backup," Imani shot back, dropping a wrench into the toolbox. Mack allowed himself a small, amused smile. Imani was the heartbeat of the shop, a fighter like her late mother. Losing his wife to cancer when Imani was just 10 had been the hardest battle of his life. Since then, he had poured everything into raising her, ensuring she had a future as solid as the foundation of their shop. She had inherited his resilience, but she also carried her own ambitions. She wanted to modernize, expand, and elevate Carter's Marine Repair. Mack admired her drive, even if he wasn't always ready to let go of the old ways. "Not everything needs fixing," he said, stepping deeper into the shop, wiping his hands clean. "And not everything works the way it used to," she countered, her eyes gleaming with determination. It was a familiar back and forth, an unspoken rhythm of mutual respect. They rarely said the words, but they both understood. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the harbor. The morning unfolded with the comforting predictability of hard work and routine. But that peace was deceptive, because trouble had already arrived in Tidewater Haven. The first sign wasn't spoken. It rumbled in on the wind, low, guttural, and unrelenting. The growl of engines. A warning. The deep rumble of approaching motorcycles sent a ripple of unease through the docks. Mac's muscles tensed instinctively, years of training sharpening his awareness as the sound grew louder. Nearby, Imani paused mid-task, her grip tightening around a coil of rope. "Dad," she asked, her voice edged with uncertainty. "Stay inside," Mac ordered, his tone low but firm. Imani hesitated but didn't retreat. Instead, she edged closer to the door, peering through the window just as the motorcycles came into view. 5 bikes rolled smoothly into the lot outside Carter's Marine Repair, their chrome frames glinting under the afternoon sun. The riders dismounted in perfect sync, their leather jackets bearing the emblem of a coiled serpent, the mark of the Iron Serpents, a gang whose influence stretched far beyond Tidewater Haven. At the center of the group stood Darius Fong Holloway, a towering figure with broad shoulders and a predator's poise. A jagged scar cut down the side of his face, his cold gaze sweeping over the shop with the air of a man who took what he wanted. Well, Fong drawled, stepping forward, a slow smirk playing on his lips. "Looks like we found ourselves a nice little business." Mac wiped his hands clean and stepped out to meet him, his posture steady. "We're closed." Fong chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I don't think so. See this place? It's prime real estate. You've done well for yourself, Carter. Real well. But I'd say you're overdue for a little insurance." "I'm not interested," Mac replied, his voice even. Fong's smirk vanished. "That wasn't a request." Behind him, one of the bikers, Jamal Viper Lewis, kicked over a crate of tools, sending wrenches and bolts clattering across the gravel. Another thug knocked over a stack of wooden pallets, the sharp crash echoing through the lot. Mac's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. He didn't flinch. "Stop it." Imani's voice rang out as she stepped outside, her eyes blazing with anger. Fong turned to her, his smirk creeping back. "And who's this?" "Your daughter." Before he could step closer, Mac shifted, placing himself between them. "Leave her out of this." Fong circled them like a shark scenting blood. "Oh, I don't think so. See, I like to know who I'm dealing with. And right now, Carter, you've got 2 choices. Pay up, or watch everything you've built burn." Imani's hands balled into fists, but Mac placed a firm, steadying hand on her shoulder. "You've made your point," Mac said quietly. "Now get out." Fong's eyes narrowed, a silent promise of trouble lingering in his gaze. "We'll be back. And next time, you'd better be ready." Engines roared to life as the Iron Serpents pulled out, leaving behind a storm of dust and destruction. Imani turned to her father, fury bubbling beneath the surface. "We can't just let them do this." Mac met her gaze, his voice calm but unwavering. "We won't." As the dust settled, Mac knew one thing for certain. Peace in Tidewater Haven was over, and he wasn't about to let anyone take what he had built without a fight. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the town as Mac locked up his shop for the night. The tools scattered earlier had been gathered, but the damage remained: broken crates, shattered glass, and the weight of an unspoken threat hanging in the air. Standing in the doorway, Mac scanned the lot where the bikers had stood just hours ago. Nearby, Imani lingered, arms crossed, her jaw tight. The battle hadn't started yet, but it was coming. "They'll be back," Imani said at last, her voice edged with anger. "I know," Mac replied, calm but weighted. "That's it." Imani snapped. "You know, and what? Just wait until they come back to wreck the place again. Or worse." Mac turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We're not waiting," he said, "but we're not panicking either." Imani stepped closer, frustration burning in her eyes. "Dad, you can't handle this alone. They're dangerous." You saw what they did today. She exhaled sharply. We need to call the sheriff. They won't stop this, Mac interrupted, his tone sharper than intended. The flicker of fear in Imani's eyes made him soften. I'll handle it. You keep saying that, but how? She pressed. What exactly are you going to do? Mac hesitated. The truth weighed heavily, pressing against the years he had spent locking it away. But there was no bearing it anymore. I'm going to fight, he said quietly. Imani's eyes widened. Fight? What does that even mean? Dad, you're a mechanic, not. I'm not just a mechanic, Mac cut in gently. Not always. The words settled between them like stones, heavy and unmoving. Imani blinked, her mind racing. What are you saying? Mac's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the last streaks of daylight reflected off the water. There are things you don't know about me, he said. Things I never told you because I didn't think you needed to know. But it's time. Imani's voice dropped to a whisper. What things? Mac exhaled slowly. Before Tidewater Haven, before you were born, I served in the Navy. Special operations. I was a SEAL. Imani stared at him, disbelief flashing into shock. You were in the military? Mac nodded. I saw things. Did things. Things I don't talk about. And when it was over, I came here to start fresh. To build a life where none of that mattered. But now it matters. For a long moment, Imani was silent, letting the weight of his words settle. Why didn't you ever tell me? She finally asked. Because I wanted you to grow up without fear, Mac said. I wanted you to see me as your father, not as a soldier. Imani swallowed hard. And now, what does this mean? It means we're not running, Mac said firmly. Not from them. That night, Mac sat in his dimly lit workshop, his phone in his hand. He hadn't made a call like this in years, but there was no avoiding it now. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Calvin Reed speaking. Cal, it's Mac. There was a pause. Damn man, Calvin said. It's been what, 5 years? Closer to 6, Mac replied. Look, I wouldn't be calling unless it was serious. Calvin's tone sharpened. What's going on? Mac took a steady breath. Trouble. A gang called the Iron Serpents. They're running shakedowns on the docks, hitting businesses. They came after mine today. Broke things. Threatened my daughter. Said they'd be back. Calvin swore under his breath. You call the cops. They won't get here fast enough, Mac said. And these guys don't scare easy. Calvin's voice darkened. So what? You want to handle this like the old days? I want to make sure my daughter's safe, Mac said. That's all that matters. A beat of silence. Then Calvin exhaled. I'll be there by morning. And Mac, if we do this, we do it smart. No mistakes. Mac hung up and leaned back in his chair. The pieces were falling into place. But this was only the beginning. By sunrise, Calvin Reed arrived in Tidewater Haven, his pickup kicking up dust as it rolled into the lot. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features and a trimmed beard, he moved with the confidence of a man who had seen combat and lived to tell the story. Mac met him at the door. Their handshake was firm. Good to see you, man, Calvin said. Mac nodded. Wish it were under better circumstances. Always is. From the doorway, Imani watched, arms crossed, skepticism in her gaze. This is Calvin, Mac said. We served together. Calvin gave her a nod. Your dad talks about you a lot. Says you're sharp. Imani didn't relax. Sharp enough to know this situation's bad. Calvin glanced at Mac. She's not wrong. How bad? Mac exhaled. 15, maybe 20 men. Armed. Organized. Their leader, Fong, isn't the type to back down. Calvin's expression hardened as he scanned the shop. Then we need more people. Mac already had a list in mind. Deshaun Big D Johnson, still in town, running the machine shop on Main. Terrence Holt, another name that mattered. It was time to call them in. Mac didn't move. His stance was solid, his eyes locked on Fong. One chance for what? Fong's smirk widened. To be smart. He gestured at the shop. This is ours now. You pay, or you leave. His voice darkened. Or we bear it down. Behind Mac, Calvin stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Big words, he said coolly. But we both know words don't mean much once the fight starts. Fong chuckled. Oh, I like you. He glanced at his men. They got some fight in them. Then his smile vanished. But not enough. The air grew thick with tension as the gang spread out, forming a loose half-circle around the shop. Tools, crates, and barrels cast jagged shadows under the dim security lights. From her position inside the storage office, Imani's voice crackled through the radio. They're testing you, she warned. They're waiting for a reaction. Mac exhaled slowly. We hold. One of Fong's men stepped forward, a burly guy with tattooed arms and a wild grin. He grabbed a wrench off the ground and hurled it at the shop's wall. The loud clang echoed through the lot. Nothing from Mac's side. Another biker kicked over a wooden pallet, sending it crashing to the ground. Still no reaction. Fong tilted his head, amused. Silent treatment, huh? That's cute. His gaze flicked to Imani's window. Bet your little girl's watching. Wonder what she's thinking right now. Mac's jaw tightened, but still he didn't move. Then Fong nodded. The attack came fast. One of the bikers lunged forward, swinging a length of chain. Mac sidestepped, caught the chain mid-air, and yanked hard, sending the man stumbling. Calvin stepped in, driving an elbow into his ribs before tossing him aside. The lot erupted into chaos. Deshawn met two attackers head-on, his sheer size turning him into a human battering ram. A punch landed on his jaw. He barely flinched before slamming his attacker into the side of a truck. Terrence stayed back, moving like a shadow, intercepting any biker who tried to slip through their defenses. Inside the office, Imani tracked every movement on the monitors. 3 more coming from the north side, she called. Big D on your left. Deshawn turned just in time, swinging a metal pipe and catching one of the bikers across the chest. Fong, still untouched, watched the fight unfold with cold amusement. Then, slowly, he pulled a knife from his belt. Enough playing, he muttered. Max saw the shift in his stance. He barely had time to brace before Fong rushed him. The fight had truly begun. Fong thrashed beneath Mac's grip, his breath ragged, his strength fading. Around them, the last remnants of the Iron Serpents were either unconscious, fleeing, or pinned down. The gang that had terrorized Tidewater Haven was finished. Mac tightened his hold, leaning in so only Fong could hear him. You're done, he said, his voice calm but absolute. Walk away now, or you won't be walking at all. Fong spat blood onto the dock, his defiance flickering like a dying flame. You think this town is safe, he rasped. There's always someone bigger, stronger. Mac yanked him up by the collar and cut him off. And they'll get the same answer you did. He shoved Fong back, sending him stumbling against a pile of broken crates. Behind them, Calvin and Deshawn regrouped, surveying the aftermath. Terrence stood near the marina's edge, rifle lowered, eyes scanning for any stragglers. Imani's voice crackled over the radio. Cops are on their way, she said. We did it. Mac exhaled, the tension in his chest finally easing. He turned to Fong one last time. Your men are done. Your grip on this town is over. And if I ever see you here again... He let the unfinished threat linger. He didn't need to say more. Fong wiped his mouth and staggered toward his bike. A few of his men, those still conscious, limped after him, their bravado shattered. Engines roared to life, and one by one, the Iron Serpents disappeared into the night. A long silence settled over the marina. Then, Deshawn let out a deep breath. Well, damn, he muttered. That was one hell of a night. Calvin clapped Mac on the back. You still got it, old man. Mac smirked. Didn't have a choice. Imani emerged from the workshop, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. She looked at her father, at the bruises forming on his face, at the wreckage around them. So what now? Mac glanced toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of gold. Now, he said, rolling his shoulders, we rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, He knew they'd won more than just a fight. They'd taken back their home. Mac wiped the sweat from his brow, glancing around at the marina as it slowly came back to life. The air was thick with the scent of salt and fresh wood as repairs continued, the sounds of hammers and drills filling the morning quiet. For the first time in a long while, Tidewater Haven felt like it was theirs again. Not just a place they were holding on to, but a home they had fought for and won. Calvin stepped up beside him, tossing a set of keys in his palm. We reinforced the back gate, added new floodlights, and rewired the security grid. If anyone tries sneaking in again, we'll know before they take their first step. Mac nodded. Good. Let's make sure we keep it that way. Nearby, Imani was at her laptop, double-checking the new security feeds. Her expression was focused, but there was a confidence in her movements that hadn't been there before. She caught Mac watching and smiled. No blind spots this time, she assured him. Before he could respond, a voice called out from the docks. Hey, Carter. Mac turned to see Jamal Viper Lewis walking toward him, a wary but determined look on his face. He held out his hands, palms up. No weapons, no threats, just a man trying to stand on his own 2 feet. I'm here to work, if you'll have me. Mac studied him for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing heavy on his shoulders. Then, finally, he nodded. Grab a broom, he said. We've got a lot to clean up. Jamal hesitated only a second before stepping forward. Reaching for the broom Taryn tossed his way. As he started sweeping, the rest of the marina crew glanced at one another, then back at Mac. You sure about this? Deshaun asked, crossing his arms. Mac exhaled. Nobody's past is clean, he said. What matters is what they do next. Deshaun nodded slowly, watching as Jamal worked, his movements precise, his expression set with quiet determination. Guess we'll see if he means it. Mac looked out over the water, where the tide was rolling in, fresh and steady. Yeah, he murmured. We will. The weeks turned into months, and the Haven's strong initiative grew beyond what any of them had imagined. What started as a small rehabilitation effort at the marina expanded into something far greater. Job programs, mentorship initiatives, and even educational workshops for at-risk youth. Local businesses started hiring from the program, giving former gang members a shot at honest work, while community leaders stepped forward to support the movement. One afternoon, Mac found himself standing outside the newly renovated youth center, watching as Jamal and a few others installed the last of the window panes. The building, once abandoned and left to decay, now stood freshly painted, its walls covered in murals depicting the town's history and resilience. A group of kids ran past, laughing as they chased a soccer ball across the newly paved courtyard. Sheriff Dixon pulled up in his patrol car, stepping out with a slow nod of approval. Didn't think I'd see the day, he admitted, folding his arms as he surveyed the scene. These boys used to be my biggest headache. Now they're building something real. Mac chuckled. Funny what happens when you give people a reason to believe in themselves. Dixon smirked. Well, let's hope they keep it up. He glanced over at Jamal, who was now showing a teenager how to measure a wooden plank before cutting. That one, he's got a future. Could have gone a different way, but you pulled him back. I didn't do it alone, Mac said. He made the choice. So did the others. As the sun dipped lower, Imani arrived with her camera, capturing the progress of the youth center for the Haven's strong website. She smiled as she framed the shot, watching the team work together. This is the kind of story people need to hear, she said. Proof that change is possible. Mac nodded, his gaze sweeping over the growing project. The marina was thriving, the town was healing, and the people who once lived in fear were now standing tall. Tidewater Haven had become more than just a place. It was a testament to the power of redemption, and as Mac looked out over the water, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning.